After I asked my father about the $100,000 my grandfather left for me, he blew up, screamed that I wasn't his child, and threw me out of the house. I was left with nothing, disowned and broken 12 years later, just as I built a successful career. He and my family came crawling back, not to apologize, but to try and ruin everything I had built. That's when I took them to court in Watch Justice Catch Up to Them. Hey, read it before we dive in. I just want to say a massive thank you. We've officially hit 2,000 subscribers. This is just the beginning. And our next milestone is 5,000 strong. So if you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and be a part of this growing community. Let's start the story. I still remember the look on his face, red with fury, veins bulging on his forehead, spit flying out of his mouth as he screamed at me like I had just committed the ultimate betrayal. But all I had done was ask one question, one simple justified question that had been lingering in my mind ever since my grandfather passed away 6 months prior. Grandpa George and I had always been close. He used to say I was the only one in the family who genuinely cared about him, not just his money. He would take me fishing, help me with homework, and share stories from his younger days, including how he built his modest fortune from absolutely nothing before he passed. He told me in confidence that he had set aside $100,000 specifically for me, held in trust until I turned 21. I was 20 when he passed away, and I thought it was reasonable to ask my father what happened to it. But what I didn't expect was for that one question to detonate a nuclear bomb in our family. It happened during a quiet Sunday lunch. I waited until everyone was nearly done eating and said, "Dad, Grandpa told me he left $100,000 for me in a trust. I just wanted to know how I can check on it." That's it, that's all I said. But the silence that followed was deafening. My mom froze her midway to her mouth. My younger sister looked down at her plate, and my father, he slowly placed his utensils down, pushed his chair back, and stood up like he was preparing for battle. His face transformed calm to enraged in seconds. Then he shouted, "How dare you accuse me of stealing from me, you ungrateful brat. That money was never yours. You have no idea what it took to keep this family afloat." He went on a tirade bringing up my so-called entitlement, blaming me for being selfish and disrespectful even though I had done everything he ever asked of me. I kept trying to explain that I wasn't accusing him, I just wanted answers, but he wasn't listening. The more I talked, the angrier he got, until he shouted the words that shattered me completely. "Get out of my house. I don't have a child like you. You're dead to me." I left that day with nothing but a backpack, some clothes, and whatever cash I had on hand. My mom didn't say a word. My sister avoided my eyes. No one stood up for me. I was 20, jobless, nearly done with college, and suddenly homeless. That night, I slept in my car park behind the 24-hour campus library. I cried until my face hurt. But after that, something inside me hardened. I told myself I would survive. I didn't need them. I didn't need him. The next few years were nothing short of hell. I worked 3 jobs at once, delivering pizzas, stocking grocery shelves, and tutoring math to high school kids while finishing my college degree. I barely had time to sleep, let alone process the emotional wreckage that came from being cast out by my own family. But with every shift, every sleepless night, and every exam I passed, I built a version of myself that could never be broken again. I graduated with top honors, got an entry-level job at a small tech startup, and slowly began to climb. I learned everything: coding, business strategy, client management, and within a few years I was managing entire departments. Still, despite the progress, the wounds were deep. I'd sometimes check my phone wondering if maybe, just maybe, my mom had tried to reach out with something real, but there was nothing. Not a single apology, not a single explanation. Birthdays passed, holidays came and went. I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding. I wasn't told when my aunt died. I was completely erased, like I had never existed. And maybe that's what hurt the most, not that they abandoned me, but that they carried on like it didn't even matter, like I never mattered. Years passed, and I eventually built my own tech consultancy. I had offices and 3 cities, a loyal team and clients who trusted me with multi-million-dollar contracts. I was living the kind of life I never dreamed possible when I was sleeping. In my car, I bought my first home, a modest but beautiful townhouse with a small garden. I tended myself, I traveled, I met people who valued me for who I was. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely happy. I had built everything on my own, no help, no handouts, no family. Then 12 years after, the day they kicked me out, the past came crashing back into my life. It started with an email from my sister sent through a weird address that sounded almost like spam. She said things like, "We miss you and Dad's not the same without you. And he made mistakes. But we all do." She even mentioned how proud they were of how far I come, but something about it felt off, too rehearsed, too perfectly timed. I ignored it. A week later, my mom called from a block number. Her voice was shaky. She said Dad had cancer, that he didn't have long, and that he wanted to make amends before it was too late again. I didn't respond. I didn't know them anything. I had already more in the family I lost. I wasn't about to dig up old wounds just because they decided it was convenient for them. That's when the attack started. Fake news articles, blog posts accusing me of stealing intellectual property, whispers in business circles about financial misconduct and tax fraud. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, just some online trolls. But then I started losing contracts. A major client pulled out of a deal last minute. A hiring agency flagged me for ongoing legal scrutiny, which made no sense, so I hired a private investigator. In what he uncovered made my blood run cold. All roads lead back to my father. Somehow he had linked up with a former business rival of mine and was feeding them lies. He wanted to ruin me, all because he couldn't stand the fact that I had succeeded without him. I gathered all the evidence, emails, phone records, financial trails, and brought it to my lawyer. We filed a lawsuit for defamation, harassment, and loss of income, but the real bombshell came during the discovery process. Buried in a seal, the state document was the original trust my grandfather had set up for me, or $100,000 account untouched for almost a year after his death, until my father withdrew the entire amount, forged my signature, and closed the trust. He had stolen my inheritance, lied to my face, kicked me out for daring to ask about it. And now, more than a decade later, he was still trying to destroy me. The courtroom was packed. Local media had picked up the story, and the drama of a disowned son suing his own father made for juicy headlines. My father looked smaller than I remembered, older, frail, but still carrying that smug arrogance I had grown up hating. He denied everything, said I had always been troubled, that I was after money, that I was trying to destroy the family name out of spite. But the evidence didn't lie. My lawyer walked the jury through every forged document, every lie, every underhanded tactics. My mother broke down on the stand. My sister refused to testify at all. And just as the judge was about to deliver the final verdict, something happened that no one expected. The courtroom fell so silent as the verdict was moments away. But before the judge could speak, my father collapsed in front of everyone. And what followed was more twisted than I could have ever imagined. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to slice with a knife every eye was glued to the judge, whose gavel hovered just above the bench, ready to strike. I sat frozen, my palms sweaty, my breath held somewhere between rage and relief. This was the moment justice would be delivered. Years of silence, betrayal, loneliness, and pain had led to this. I had exposed the lies. The world finally knew the truth. But just as the judge opened his mouth to speak, my father suddenly clutched his chair. Justin fell forward with a loud thud against the table. Gasps erupted from the gallery. My mother screamed. The bailiff rushed to his side, shouting for paramedics. I just sat there staring at him, not moving, not blinking. Part of me wondered if it was real or some last-ditch attempt at sympathy. The man who had thrown me into the streets over my honey, the same man who tried to destroy my life all over again, was now lying crumbled and gasping on the cold courtroom floor. Paramedics arrived within minutes, wheeling him out as my mother trailed behind, sobbing. Court was adjourned until further notice. I left the building in a daze. I should have felt victorious, vindicated, but Instead, I felt hollow. I went home that night and stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering what the hell was wrong with me. Was I supposed to feel sorry for him? Was I supposed to forgive him because karma had caught up? But I couldn't forget the way he had looked at me 12 years ago, as if I were less than nothing, the man who had screamed, "I don't have a child like you." That kind of scar doesn't fade with time, and I wasn't about to rewrite history just because he was suddenly weak and human. 2 days later, I received a call from my lawyer. My father had survived the heart attack, but just barely. He was in the hospital sedated and likely wouldn't be able to return to court for weeks, but the case was strong enough that the judge was still considered. In a ruling based on the evidence presented, there was a hearing scheduled to determine if it would proceed without him. But that wasn't the only news. Apparently, my father had panicked in the weeks leading up to the trial. He knew what was coming, and in that panic he'd made some terrible decisions. One of them was signing over some of his assets to distant cousins to shield from being seized. Unfortunately for him, he didn't do it legally. Ford again. His accounts were now being investigated by the IRS, and the charges were piling up. If convicted, he was looking at years in prison, even if his health held up. Meanwhile, the court case resumed. Though now the attention had doubled, media outlets picked up the phone. Family Feud with renewed interest. Reporters camped outside my office. Friends I hadn't heard from in years messaged me pretending to check in. My own mother sent me a letter handwritten pleading for mercy. She said my father was dying, that I was killing him by dragging the family through the mud. She didn't mention the money he stole from me, where the years I spent hung, agree and homeless. She didn't even apologize, just begged me to make it all stop. But I wasn't stopping, not now. The court ruled in my favor. 2 weeks later, full damage is awarded. My father was ordered to pay back the $100,000 plus interest. The total came to nearly $270,000. Add to that the cost, the smear campaign, legal fees, and personal damages, and the final judgment was close to $600,000. The judge didn't mince words in his verdict. He called my father's actions malicious, calculated, and emotionally devastating. It was, in his words, a betrayal of the highest order. A few jurors cried during the reading. I didn't. I sat there stone-faced, trying to absorb it all. But it wasn't over. A few weeks after the ruling, I received notice from my lawyer that my father had filed an appeal. Of course he did, even from a hospital bed hooked up to tubes and monitors. The man still couldn't admit he was wrong, still couldn't let go of his hatred. He claimed the trust was misrepresented, that he had used the money to support the family, that I had turned everyone against him out of revenge. The appeal didn't last long. The judge threw it out, but told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't sorry. He never would be. Months passed. My father's health continued to decline. He was eventually moved to a nursing facility where he lived under constant supervision, monitored, restricted, and now entirely dependent on a medical system. He once mocked, "I never visited, I never called, I never sent a letter." But I did hear from my sister one last time. She showed up at my office, unannounced, holding her toddler on her hip, looking older and exhausted. She asked if we could talk in private. Against my better judgment, I agreed. She sat across from me and said she wanted to clear the air, not to defend her father, but to explain. She told me how he had gambled away most of the family savings years before I ever asked about the trust, how he was drowning in debt and couldn't admit to anyway. One, not even himself. She admitted he stole the money, that he hated me not because I was wrong, but because I had seen through him, because I had exposed the truth he tried to bury. She cried, apologized, told me she wished she had spoken up back then. I thank her, but I also told her something that left her speechless. I said, "I don't hate you, but I don't forgive you either. Not yet, maybe one day, but not today." And that was it. I never heard from many of them again. My mother moved away quietly. My sister stopped calling. My father eventually passed, and I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't send flowers. I didn't post anything online. I just went for a walk that day alone and let the wind carry away whatever lingering bitterness I still had in my chest. I survived what they did to me, I built something from nothing, and when they came to burn it all down, I didn't just defend it. I burned down their lies. Instead, justice doesn't always come quickly. But when it does, it is sharp, and it is final, and in the end they got exam.